Have you ever felt like you were nothing more than a burden to the very people you gave everything to? I did. One phone call shattered the little faith I had left in family. My daughter, the child I raised with every ounce of love in me, called to announce she had married, and I wasn't even worthy of an invitation. Before I could process the betrayal, she demanded the keys to the beach house. Not with gratitude, not even with hesitation, but with entitlement. And in her voice, I didn't hear my daughter anymore. I heard her husband, the man whose greed had always lingered in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My name is Eleanor Price, and I am a 67-year-old widow. For most of my life, I thought I understood what family meant. My husband, Daniel, and I built our world on love, hard work, and the belief that our daughter Anna would carry those values forward. When Daniel passed away, my world shrank. Suddenly, everything I had left was bound up in two things: my daughter and the beach house he left us. That house was never just a building. It was where Anna took her first steps, where Daniel and I celebrated our anniversaries, where we spent summer nights listening to the waves crash against the shore. It smelled of salt and cedarwood, carried echoes of laughter, and held the warmth of every holiday we spent together as a family. To me, it was sacred, a place of memory, a living legacy of Daniel's love. But then came Victor. Victor walked into our lives like a well-polished storm. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a kind of smile that could charm anyone in a crowded room. His words were smooth, his compliments carefully chosen, but his eyes told a different story. They weren't warm, they weren't kind, they were calculating. Whenever he visited, I noticed how his gaze lingered just a little too long on the house. Not on Anna, not even on me, but on the walls, the furniture, the heirlooms Daniel left behind. It was as though he wasn't meeting the family. He was appraising an estate. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe grief had made me overly protective. Maybe I was imagining things. Anna was in love, and after years of watching her struggle with loneliness, I wanted to believe she had finally found happiness. But little moments kept nagging at me. Victor always volunteered to help with paperwork whenever Anna and I discussed finances. He asked too many questions about the house, its ownership, its market value. And Anna, my sweet, trusting Anna, seemed to hang on his every word. She began repeating his opinions as if they were her own, brushing aside my concerns with a laugh. One evening, as the sun set behind the horizon, Victor leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the ocean. I caught the faintest smile tugging at his lips, not of peace or appreciation, but of possession. It sent a chill down my spine. That was when I realized I had seen this kind of hunger before. It was the hunger of men who did not love people, they loved what people owned. And for the first time, I began to wonder if the greatest threat to my family didn't come from strangers, but from the man who had just married my daughter. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe I was clinging too tightly to Anna. Maybe Victor was just trying to build his place in the family, and my grief was making me suspicious. But soon the cracks began to show, and they widened faster than I could mend them. Anna stopped visiting as often. Where she once dropped by with groceries, laughter, or even just to sit on the porch with me, now weeks would pass without so much as a knock on the door. Our phone calls grew shorter. Conversations that once carried warmth now felt clipped, rehearsed, almost monitored. Then came the call that twisted the knife. Anna's voice was strangely hesitant as she explained, "Victor thinks spending holidays with you feels like too much pressure. He says it's time for me to build new traditions with him." Her words felt foreign, as though they were scripted by someone else. And then, with an almost casual cruelty, she added, "Besides, Mom, maybe it's time you let the beach house go. Victor and I need space for our future." The silence that followed was deafening. My own daughter, my Anna, was speaking of the house not as our family's heart, but as a bargaining chip in her marriage. I tried to push it out of my mind, but the truth revealed itself in a way I could never ignore. At a neighborhood gathering, I found myself standing near the porch when Victor's voice drifted through the air, low and smug. I froze. By next year, he told a friend, his tone dripping with arrogance, that house will be mine. The old woman just doesn't know it yet. And the worst part? Anna stood beside him. She didn't protest. She didn't defend me. She just lowered her eyes and let the words hang there, unchallenged. I felt something break inside me. For a moment, grief swallowed me whole. This wasn't just betrayal from a son-in-law I never trusted. It was betrayal from my only child, the little girl whose scraped knees I once bandaged, whose tears I once kissed away. But grief, I've learned, has a strange alchemy. Left alone too long, it transforms. As I stood there that night, clutching the railing of the porch to keep myself upright, grief hardened into something sharper, something steadier. Determination. If Victor thought I would go quietly, he had underestimated me. If Anna believed my silence meant surrender, she had forgotten the woman who raised her. They might have circled me like vultures, but I was not finished. Not yet. This was no longer about sentiment, it was about survival. And I was ready to fight for what was mine. I remembered something my husband once told me before he died. His voice, though softened by illness, still carried that steady conviction. Ellie, if anyone ever tries to take what's yours, trust your gut. I left you ways to fight back. At the time, I thought he meant it as comfort. Now, I realized it was a warning. And perhaps a map. So I started digging. At first, it was small, Googling Victor's name late at night, scrolling through public records. But what I found was only the tip of the iceberg. With the help of Harold, a retired lawyer and an old friend of my husband's, I pulled threads until the whole fabric of Victor's polished image began to unravel. There it was, in black and white, multiple failed marriages, each ending with mysteriously missing funds. Businesses that looked legitimate on paper but collapsed under scrutiny, leaving creditors furious and partners betrayed. And then, the gut punch. Harold found a set of old court documents tying Victor's family name to a web of fraudulent investment schemes. Investors had lost everything, including, I discovered, my own husband. Years before he died, he had been swindled by Victor's uncle in a deal that nearly cost us the beach house itself. It wasn't fate that had brought Victor into Anna's life. It was design. Every cell in my body wanted to march into Anna's home, slam the papers on the table, and shout the truth until she listened. But I knew my daughter. Anna was blinded by love, by promises of security, by Victor's silken words. If I came at him head-on, she would only see a bitter old mother trying to destroy her happiness. No, words weren't enough. I needed her to see it, to feel it. So I set a trap. I quietly gathered everything: financial records, hidden debts, testimonies from his ex-partners. I even had Harold record a call with one of Victor's former wives, who spoke with shaking fury about the man who had drained her bank accounts and left her stranded. Then I planned the stage. Anna's birthday was approaching, and Victor was throwing her a small dinner party at the beach house, without even asking me. I told him I'd attend, smiling sweetly, as though I were finally ready to accept him. But what Victor didn't know was that I had invited a few unexpected guests. Among them, his former wife, and one of the men he scammed out of his retirement savings. I wasn't going to tell Anna who her husband really was. I was going to let her watch him unravel, piece by piece, in front of everyone. Anna and Victor invited me, reluctantly, to their anniversary dinner. The invitation was more formality than kindness. I could hear the strain in Anna's voice when she called. But I accepted, smiling to myself. If Victor thought he was drawing me into a performance of his triumph, he was sorely mistaken. This wasn't his stage. It was mine. The beach house had been polished for the evening. Candles flickered, silverware gleamed, and Victor played the perfect host. His charm oozed across the table, infecting everyone with false warmth. Anna, though radiant, seemed oddly subdued, as if somewhere deep down, A seed of doubt was already sprouting. We moved through courses of wine and roast, polite conversation masking the storm that brewed beneath the surface. My heartbeat was steady, not with nerves, but with resolve. I had waited too long for this moment. Then came dessert, a chocolate soufflé, Victor's choice. As the plates were set down, he rose to his feet, glass of wine in hand. The room hushed. His smile stretched, wolfish and sure. "Friends, family," he began, his voice velvet. "Tonight isn't just about celebrating love. It's about responsibility. 4 years, Eleanor has carried the weight of our family estate. But now," he paused, savoring the moment, "now it's time for me to step up, to take over what will soon belong to Anna and me, to secure our future." He glanced at me, smug triumph in his eyes. That grin, so sure he had already won, was my cue. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my bag and slid a small, elegant box across the table toward him. "A gift," I said softly. Victor's grin widened as he tore it open, no doubt expecting an antique watch or gold cufflinks. But his smile faltered when he saw the contents. Not jewelry, but neatly stacked folders. Bank statements, lawsuits, photographs of him with his former business partners. Pages upon pages of carefully documented lies. The room stiffened with unease. Anna leaned forward, confusion etched across her face. But that was only the beginning. The walls suddenly came alive with sound. Hidden speakers, wired hours earlier by Harold's grandson, crackled to life. Victor's own voice filled the room, cruel and arrogant. "By next year, that house will be mine. The old woman just doesn't know it yet." Gasps rippled across the table. Anna's hand shot to her mouth. Her husband's words, his true intentions, echoed around us, undeniable. Victor staggered back, his composure unraveling. This is out of context," he stammered, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. Then came the final blow. The doors opened. In walked Harold, my lawyer friend, not alone but flanked by 2 uniformed officers. His voice cut through the stunned silence. "Mr. Victor Hale, you are under investigation for fraud, coercion, and financial exploitation. You'll need to come with us." The smugness drained from Victor's face. His glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor like the illusion he had built. Anna's eyes brimmed with tears, not for him, but for the betrayal she could no longer deny. And as Victor was led away in handcuffs, his mask completely shattered, I sat quietly in my chair. Not gloating, not smiling, just breathing, at last, the clean air of justice. Victor was arrested that very night, his arrogance dissolving into a pathetic display of excuses as the officers clasped cold steel around his wrists. The man who once strutted through my home like a conqueror was reduced to a stammering coward, dragged away under the weight of his own greed. The silence he left behind was deafening. Anna, pale and trembling, tried at first to deny what she had witnessed. "No, it can't be true," she whispered, her voice cracking as though she wanted reality to bend for her. But the evidence lay in front of her, undeniable and unrelenting. Every folder, every recording, every statement carved the truth deeper into her heart. And when she finally collapsed into a chair, sobs shaking her body, I saw not just betrayal, but the breaking of an illusion she had clung to for far too long. For me, it was bittersweet. I had won, not out of malice, but out of necessity. My fight was never just about a house, or even about the inheritance Victor craved. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my right to live without fear of being consumed by someone else's greed. In the weeks that followed, the story spread through our community. Neighbors who once pitied me now looked at me with a quiet respect. Some even confessed they had doubted me, believing Victor's polished lies. But truth, I've learned, always cuts through eventually. I made a decision that surprised many. I sold the beach house. Not because Victor had forced me out, but because I refused to let that place become a monument to betrayal. It was never the bricks or the ocean view that mattered. It was the life I chose to live within those walls. And that life, I decided, would not be tied to ghosts. With the money, I launched something new, a foundation for women who, like me, had been abandoned, dismissed, or exploited by those they trusted most. Women who needed more than sympathy. They needed tools, resources, and the courage to stand again. Helping them became my new calling, my true legacy. As for Anna, our path is not simple. She carries guilt, shame, and the ache of misplaced trust. But she has also shown remorse, a deep desire to make amends. We speak more now than we did in years past, not as mother and daughter in perfect harmony, but as two women learning to rebuild on fragile ground. Forgiveness is not instant. It grows slowly, like fragile roots pushing through stone. And me. For the first time in years, I feel alive. Not because justice was served neatly in a courtroom, but because I reclaimed it with my own hands. I chose not to be a victim, not to let betrayal define the rest of my life. Justice, I've realized, isn't something given. It's something we seize, piece by piece, moment by moment. And that night, as Victor was taken away, I didn't just win a battle. I reclaimed myself. My story isn't only about revenge, it's about the courage to reclaim dignity when others try to strip it away. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those closest to us, wearing the mask of love while plotting our downfall. But hear this, your value is not defined by their lies, and your strength doesn't vanish because someone underestimates you. Justice isn't handed down. It's fought for, step by step. If you were in my place, would you confront them head-on or walk away for peace? Share your answer in the comments. I want to hear your truth.